All right, so we are live. So thank you to those of you who are joining us on the replay. So I'm excited today to talk about a different growth strategy. Oftentimes we're talking about, tactics and strategies within your business, but there's other ways to grow. And sounds like my lawn is no longer growing. I don't know if my microphone is picking up the fact that we are live and the lawn folks are out there. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about growth through acquisition. So there could be some potential growth opportunities for you and for your business and growing here in the coming months. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my screen and introduce Walker Deibel, who's the author of the #1 Amazon selling book. He's going to show it here, Buy, Then Build. And also he has recently created the Acquisition Lab, as well as he is a broker at Quiet Light Brokerage. So I'm really excited to have Walker Deibel on here today. Walker, thanks for coming on.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here. And just so you know, we can't hear the lawnmower. So it's
good. Sometimes I wonder what gets picked up. So anyway, if you don't mind just sharing for folks that are watching here, a little bit about your background and how you got into the whole world of acquisitions.
Sure. So, the thing is I struggle a little bit where to start because my first job out of college, I was actually a stockbroker for one of the big financial institutions. And it was where I was able to have that experience going into the tech bust. So, my first job out of college, within a year, the whole economy was crumbling and sort of moving quickly into 9/11.
Right.
But, just the education of having the formal education around, the public stock markets and all of the stock trading, and frankly, you're acquiring a stock and selling a stock and all the rest of it was instrumental. Fast forward a number of years, I was going to Olin School of Business for my MBA and had a startup. It was very promising. We were finalists in the business plan competition, had a very large national retailer who wanted to roll us out as a supplier. And all of a sudden, we had investors lining up, no one quite writing checks, but it was all right there. And then basically the month that I graduated, the rug was pulled out and we lost our licensing from our key supplier, and the whole thing crumbled. So because my startup was so promising, I didn't do something that most MBAs do, and that's look for a job. And what happened was there's a little difference between being an MBA student with a very promising startup and being a recent graduate without that startup. And the word for that is unemployed. And so it was that I knew at that time that entrepreneurship really wasn't a job. It's more of a condition. I know you can relate to this, Kevin. And the thing is, I had already made the circuit. I already had my idea. I was already pitching, for money. And it was one of these where I knew that I didn't have another idea, but I knew there was a way that you could buy an existing company. And so I just sort of set out in 2004 on my own to try to figure out how to do it.
Okay. Gotcha. So what did you decide to do in 2004 to go figure out how to do it?
Okay, so basically, it was just a matter of how does the private capital markets work, right? Like, what are the valuations? How do I get deal flow? Where do you find these deals? And what I was met with was a really opaque and fragmented marketplace, right? And the essence of the private markets is that they are private, so it's really hard to get good information. Plus, at that time, I was in my late 20s. I had no money, so it was really hard to get people who were selling companies to try to take me seriously and talk to me. My first search actually ended in failure, and I went corporate. And the reason why is because we now know through research at Stanford that the average search takes about the average sponsored search, meaning backed by investors, takes 18 months. And of course, in 2004, I didn't know that. So 7 months in, you start to feel very broke, right? And you're like right around, close to turning that corner. But the thing is that I learned kind of the hard way is that it was the brokers who had the deals, right? And so I was reaching out to the brokers, and whether they called themselves brokers or M&A advisors or investment bankers, any one of these titles would be someone who would potentially have my deal. but the
Right.
sophistication level of these people had a huge range, huge. It's an unregulated market. And so the way that different people find themselves into this role is very different. I literally had a guy who I'm pretty sure was terminated as a used car salesman who tried to sell me a pet cemetery. And then really? And then I also had like a former Wall Street investment banker end up with a company that wasn't that much larger that I was talking to. And so it's just, it's kind of a crazy place to navigate. Ultimately, I went corporate for a while until I was able to find my way there.
Okay. So then now you're in the corporate world, you're trying to figure out what you want to do. So then how did you get into the world of then acquisitions? Help me bridge that gap there.
Cross the gap. Okay. So here's the thing. Number one, it was one of these where I was working at Cooper Surgical actually, and it was one of these where I was a top performer. I got like third in the country that year for my output, and it's one of these where you start to feel when you have had your own business before and you're really working hard for somebody else, you start to feel inside like everything that I'm doing is building equity for this other company that I actually don't own. Right.
Oh, totally know that. You're working hard for someone else's dreams.
That's it. And so other people were benefiting from my work, and I felt like it was a little asymmetrical, which is slightly unfair and a little bit naive. But being in my late 20s, that's how things are, right?
Right.
So ultimately, what happened was I bought a book printing company. Okay. And this is a story that I actually love to tell, and don't get the opportunity to tell that often. And I actually downplayed it with my early work. So this is a story that isn't out there too much. Is it okay if I go this direction?
Please.
Okay.
Just keep going.
All right, great. What happened was that here I was killing it, and then I started looking for another business to acquire on a part-time search, which I also started to determine had its own problems. Different story. My dad owned a printing company, and he came to me and said, Walker, why don't you come over and work at the printing company? Print books, right? And I said, why should I do that? And he said, let's just see if you show up at work on time. It was my whole life I was told there is no role for you in my company. I'm not going to be the guy that gives my company to his kid who screws it up. Go do your own thing. This was the message.
Right.
Now I've got an MBA. I'm killing it. I've been sitting on the board at his company. I mean, things were starting to change. And so I started over there, and we came up with a 27-step plan for transferring the business. And we did it by sitting on the same side of the table, working with attorneys and accountants and, the whole thing, and sort of structured how it would all go. Once we did it, and the thing is it sounds intense, like 27 steps. It was actually pretty simple. It goes like this. I go to the bank. I get a big, I don't know what I can say on Facebook Live. I got a very big loan.
Okay.
big F loan. And then I write him a check, and then he stops coming to work. It's not very hard, right? I mean, that was basically it. And, I got no discounts. I got no favors. It was no anything.
Right.
But I had the opportunity to get that deal done, right? And the thing is that I had two realizations here. Number one, number one was all of a sudden, all of his friends and everyone that we in our network started coming in and saying, like, how did you do that? Like, how do you actually transfer a business, right? And like, we had sort of figured it out. Secondly, and I think more importantly, I had spent, 2 years and even before that, I was coming out of the Bay Area. So, I mean, I'd spent probably 4 years in hardcore, like, startup mode, right?
Right.
And what I realized was, wait a minute, I just like acquired like $8 million of revenue through cash flow on a bank loan with collateral that was like the infrastructure of the business. It was truly a leveraged buyout in the Wall Street sense, right? Okay. And so it's where like I was like, everyone has it backwards. But here's the thing, like we touched on, the private markets are private. And more importantly, it's sort of like I fit the mold of what people look like that actually get this done. Namely, I'm a white male, oldest kid whose dad owns a business, right? And so I started realizing, wait a minute, no one knows, like this is being way understated, and there's a tremendous opportunity going on here.
Okay. So basically you started realizing like, okay, you learned because of certain accesses you had what the process looked like. And so how would someone else that maybe doesn't have all that access start saying, okay, how do I acquire? Because you said something there I just want to touch on that kind of hit me, was like, okay, so you're buying a business and you're getting access to the value of that business, not based on your own collateral, but the collateral of the business itself.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of changes in the space from 2006 to 2000.
I'm sure. Yeah. Yes.
So let's back up a little bit, but
okay.
Let me change what you're saying in this way. I want to challenge. This is what I challenge people to think. I think that the goal of a startup, okay, is to create an infrastructure that generates revenue,
okay,
which is more than what it costs to operate. All that.
Okay. Right.
In other words, if you build an infrastructure that you generate revenue, once the revenue hits a point that it's more than the cost of the infrastructure, you see profit on the bottom line, and it's at that minute that you become a sustainable business, right? The minute you can stop freaking out about cash flow and start focusing on how many people you can help, that's when you're successful, right?
Love it.
Okay, so the thing is that when you acquire an existing company, number one, it has existing customers. Number two, it has infrastructure. Number three, it has profitable revenue. Okay. And so when you go to acquire this business, it's being valued on the earnings of the business. Okay. Usually a multiple that represents a certain number of years. Okay. We could talk for 4 hours about that, but let's not go there.
Right.
So let's say on average for a company under $5 million in transaction value, that multiple might be 3. Okay. So let's say this business generates $500,000. I'm going to go get a loan for 1.5 million, which is $500,000 times 3. Okay. Right. And then the SBA is actually lending up to 90% of the transaction value, even on cash flow loans. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I'm I don't want to introduce too many topics at once. But the concept is you can buy one of the largest 4% of companies in the United States for less than $100,000 out of pocket.
Got it. So so a friend of mine here, we were talking about before we hit live, recently purchased, maybe like in the last year, a local business that was doing business around the country, selling to schools, selling educational supplies. He does a little bit on Amazon, but for the most part, he basically bought the infrastructure of a company, their warehouse agreement, their employees, their knowledge. And, it's not easy to go into a school system and get contracts and become a vendor. So he bought access to all that. So that's kind of what you're describing here, regardless of whether it's, educational supplies or selling on Amazon or, a restaurant, right?
That's right. And I also maybe should add that after the whole Corley experience, the printing company experience, and by the time I eventually sold it, which is a whole nother story. I was trying to grow through acquisition, which ended in an exit. I then went out and bought another 6 companies after I did another startup that totally blew up. So the thing is that, I did buy 7 companies over 10 years, and only 2 of them were under 7-figure deals. So I've done this times myself. When I started writing Buy Then Build, I didn't want to be the guy. I started writing for other people, and it was those interviews that actually started to help me create all the frameworks that are actually in the book. So to your point, one of the companies I bought was a very similar situation. Okay. This broker called that I'd worked with in the past. He said, "How's that startup going?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, it's rocky." And he was like, "Good. There's a business here. There's a perfect fit for you. You got to come see it, Walker." And I said, "Okay." So I went and I looked at it, and it was one of these where right away, Kevin, it was like, I don't know what to say. I mean, maybe like it was a very understated building, rural Missouri, just kind of, like not a lot of upward mobility in the employee base kind of going on, very relaxed sort of operation. And I went in and I was like, this is not going to work, right? It's not going to work. But then over the course of like an hour-long conversation, I realized, wait a minute, very similar to your friend, these guys have existing customers, like hundreds of existing customers. And they were using this online ordering system that paralleled DOS. Like it required heavy training, and these people were still using it. And I was like, okay, this is quite a moat. And there's such room for improvement here that I saw a growth opportunity immediately. So I'm not sure what your friend friend's story was, but it sounds parallel. Like, right, like you can acquire. When I tried to grow the printing company through acquisition, what I realized was it was less expensive to grow through acquisition than it was to continue growing new products and new markets from scratch. And it had more certainty.
Gotcha. So if someone's doing an SBA loan with a 90% of the value of the company, or the value of the company, I guess is the way to phrase it. So
the transaction value. Yeah.
The transaction value. Okay. Thank you. So then roughly what percentage on, like, let's say a 3 times multiple would they expect of their revenue to be going back to paying this off?
Well, the transaction value is going to be based on earnings, which is the number we really care about anyway, right? And so it's going to be about 45% of those earnings are going to go towards paying down that loan, and it's going to last about 10 years. So it's not insignificant. It's not insignificant. And
you said 10 years?
10 years.
Okay, so 10 years. But at the same time, too, if you decided you wanted to sell it in 5 years, you would have paid down a good chunk of that loan. So you'd have that value back. And then hopefully you would have also built up the value of the company on top of it, right?
I mean, Kevin, if you can grow the company, if you can buy a company with 90% leverage and grow it at a rate of 10%, I mean, even if you sold it 5 years or 10 years out, I like 10 years because then the loan, you get the full equity build up, you stop paying the interest. And when you run the calculations, I mean, the returns are unparalleled to any other investment class, period. And I think the secret here is the fact that we talk a lot about passive investment and like, hey, I'm gonna do nothing, and like, 4-hour work week, right?
Right.
Which, footnote, Tim Ferriss has to work more than any other human on earth, just for the record. You know what I mean?
Right.
Look at this guy outputs.
Even in his book, he admits there was no 4-hour work week.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah. So it's like if you can create a 4-hour work week, like I once bought a company, I still own it. I bought a company that is essentially a 4-hour work week through Quiet Light Brokerage, actually. And my first thought was, okay, let me go buy 9 more of these, right? Like, I mean, let's scale it, right? In that direction, all the core competencies are the same, right? So where's I going with that? So with passive investment, there's a couple things going on. Number one, you get the equity buildup. I'm choosing to use like a real estate example. Okay, you'd have the equity buildup. You buy the building with a loan, and the tenants pay you, which then builds up the equity. You get the same thing in acquisition entrepreneurship, right? So you buy it with you get the equity buildup, but with the passive investment, the appreciation value is dependent on the marketplace. And so I forget what the average is over the last 30 years. Maybe it's 1.5% on annual growth.
Okay.
If you are active in a business, the downside is that, you could crash the business and go bankrupt. I mean, let's call it business, okay? But like,
there's always risk.
Yeah, don't buy a business if you're.
Or the government could say nobody can come into your business because it's not essential or something.
There you go. Right.
Right.
But the upside is whatever the size of that market is, right? So it's literally like put your back into it and build value. And when you sell it, I mean, the returns are just unparalleled. This is how people get wealthy, right? They grow businesses.
Right. So comparing it to, say, working for a company for 40 years and, getting maybe a little bit of a pension or having a 401k built up, you're saying if you're doing this, it would greatly accelerate that. Am I understanding this right?
Yeah, I mean, trying to compare it to like a government pension is kind of a stretch because that's a pretty sweet deal. But what I guess I would say is that 100% of ultra high net worth individuals own their own company. Period. 100% of ultra high net worth individuals own their own company. So,
what would you say that threshold is for ultra high net worth?
There's a definition. It's like I have 5 million in cash over and above my principal residence, or something like that. Or
okay. So yeah, I mean that's
yeah.
And
so the point is, but the opposite is not true, right? In other words, if I own a business doesn't mean that I'm an ultra high net worth individual.
True.
My point, Kevin, is that I think that owning a business is the best, fastest route of building wealth for most people. Okay. And so I think that, if you are interested in this lifestyle, then you know it. If you're not interested in this lifestyle, then you know it. It's a very active investment, and it's a very active lifestyle. And if you own a company, when you breathe, that company is breathing. Okay.
Right.
I mean, like there's no out. When you go on vacation, your company is right there with you on the beach.
Yes.
And that's why all these people are like, look, I'm doing work on the beach. It's like, yeah, because
you have no choice.
You work everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a lifestyle choice, and it's one that if you want to build financial independence, then and you manage the risks correctly and you make the right choices, then yes, I mean, this is absolutely the fastest way to financial independence for most people.
Okay, good deal. So now you've got me very curious about the acquisition side of things, because a lot of times, in the e-commerce and Amazon world, people talk more about like, hey, I'm building my business and one day maybe sell it. But you're talking about really the inverse. So, is now a good time to start thinking about buying companies just with all that's going on in the world?
I can make a case either way. This is what I'm going to say. Here's my take on COVID-19 and the impact on acquisitions. Number one, the SBA lending up to 90% of these acquisitions since I think it was January 1st, 2018 was when they started saying we're going to do cash flow based loans, meaning I don't need to go buy a printing facility with big printing presses as collateral. I will let you go buy an FBA business, fulfilled by Amazon business that has no real infrastructure of any kind, but it's generating $250,000 a year or $1 million a year. Pick your number.
Okay.
So that's a cash flow based loan. Okay. The SBA has been driving the whole marketplace in let's say Main Street acquisition, so under 5 million. Let's go up to 25 million. 25 million and less. The SBA has really been a huge driver. Okay. Will COVID-19 decrease the SBA's involvement in wanting to lend? That's going to be the big question. Okay. I predict the answer is they will not stop at all. And here's why.
Okay.
The baby boomers own more businesses than any generation in history. Okay. They have over $10 trillion in business asset value. Okay. Or business value. Okay.
Sure.
Use it on balance sheet, but so they have $10 trillion in business value that needs to change hands between now and 2028. Okay. So there's like 8 years where we need to move like $10 trillion. If you don't, what's going to happen is the small business infrastructure of the United States that we've been building since World War II will be erased. It's enormous.
Okay.
Like just understanding what needs to happen is actually a very big challenge, right? And so the SBA is the thing, and they've never come out and said this. This is just my theory. The thing is they've got to move it. And so the thing is that the SBA is going to continue doing that. And what we've seen with COVID is that they know what they're doing, right? They're using all of their levers to get this done. But then the thing is that the minute there was a speed bump, the minute that there was a challenge, they rose to the occasion and have settled the issue. I mean, there's basically like a bailout going on, right? With these businesses and all these loans. I own a manufacturing facility as well right now. We got the triple P. I filed for the deferment, all the rest of it. Here's what else they're doing. If you acquire a business between today and right now, the date is September 29th, the SBA is paying on your behalf the first 6 months of the principal and interest on the loan. It's not
really.
Yes, really. So the thing is let's say, for example, that you buy a business for, okay, I don't want to get into the math because it's a little, I'd stretch it, but I'll make wrong calculations and your audience will turn the channel. But you understand the impact of this, right? So it's so instead of paying 10 years of payments, I only have to pay 9.5, and the government is going to go ahead and take the first 6, interest heavy payments. So is it a good time or not? I think the first fundamental thing is SBA financing going to be available? I think absolutely yes. And they are even putting in incentives to do it. Number 2, Kevin, I'm hearing a lot of, people kind of rubbing their hands together going, oh man, there's going to be so many deals, right? Okay. I can tell you, just working as an advisor, I can tell you that when I find a business that has a really, really strong foundation, but it's sort of a speed bump because of some sort of external situation. Okay. And we go to sell it. buyers don't run towards it, right? They don't jump all over it. Okay. It takes a very sophisticated entrepreneur to understand what they're looking at and understand that the fundamentals are correct. Buying a business is scary. And so it gives what gives people confidence is the fact like, okay, I can look at this and I can see like for the last 5 years, every single month it's been going up, right? But like when all of a sudden it goes up for 3 years and then like there's a huge problem in the 4th year because of external influences, but all the fundamentals are right, people aren't interested. It drives the value down, which should make it even more interesting. The point is when I serve up what I perceive as really good deals to potential buyers don't actually want them, right? So it's there's kind of this like, oh man, there's going to be all these. So take it the other way. If I've got a good business with strong fundamentals, and let's say valuations start going down because like, people are having problems with COVID-19 or something, then the market comes down, valuations go down. I can't sell my business for what I want, and I've got a good business, so I don't sell it. Okay. So now all the good businesses aren't selling. Third, the deals that really are going to be out there are going to be people that hit this snag. They have cash flow problems and they have to sell. That's where your deals are going to be.
Okay.
If you've got cash flow problems, number one, SBA is not really going to be there. They're going to be like, yeah, we're going to pass on this one. Don't like the fundamentals. So you've got to now show up with cash. So I think cash buyers are going to be the ones that are going to be able to swoop in and like take advantage of a bunch of deals right now, which is why, the government, we've heard some noise that they're talking about putting a pause on all M&A activity because there's $2 trillion in cash in the private equity firms right now. And they're scared that private equity is going to come in with their cash and just like buy Main Street.
Got it. Okay. So there's a lot there to unpack. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, and I've heard this elsewhere before.
Cool.
Dan Pena, another YouTuber, I'm sure you're probably familiar with him. He talks about like acquisitions and stuff. But he's talking about like all this wealth transfer going to happen. I like the way you phrased it very eloquently of basically between now and 2028, we're going to have to, otherwise what's going to happen to all this infrastructure? And then, the private equity firms might just come in and buy Main Street and then we're small business. So I could see the government would want to help facilitate all this. So if someone says, okay, whether I'm going for a deal or I'm just going for fundamentals or whatever the case is, what are some things one should look for?
Okay. So, the thing is like, there's kind of 7 elements that buyers really should look for. I mean, and I mean, you can get a lot done with these 7 things, right? So, 4 are going to be, heavily borrowed from Quiet Light's philosophy, but I think it works not only for sellers, but for buyers. The first two are just understanding the fundamental drivers of value. And that's going to be growth and earnings. Okay. So when you look at a business and you see that it's growing and you know what the earnings are, you are going to have a sense of what the business is going to be valued at approximately, right? I know that's proper grammar, but you'll have a sense of what it is. And I guess I won't go into the AE matrix, but there's sort of 4 quadrants of acquisition opportunity and where you can increase value. And so knowing in what quadrant you're in will help you determine not only the growth opportunity, but also the valuation of the company. So growth and earnings. Okay. What's going on there? The next 4, straight from Quiet Light. So it's identifying the business risks. So for example, I always tell people, you need to understand your strengths and what you bring to the table before you even start looking for a business, right? You buy then build, or you go through the acquisition lab. The whole first part is all about what do you bring to the table, okay? And that's the number one thing that most buyers get wrong. They screw that part up. If you already are selling on an FBA store, for example, okay? I've got an FBA store, I'm selling on Amazon. I know what's up with FBA, okay?
Right.
Then when you look at the business risks, the business risk might be, hey, it's 100% FBA. Well, for you, that's not a problem because you know FBA. Get it? But someone coming in from the outside is like, well, I don't know. There's like this whole like channel power situation. Like, I don't like Amazon owns, like 24 months ago, people are like, why would I buy an Amazon business? Like, I just like Amazon owns all of it. But now it's in
Right.
a channel. So business risks. Then you've got, documentation, transferability, and growth opportunities. Okay, so understanding future growth of the opportunities and how you can increase value. All right, and the last thing, the seventh thing, is what I call the target statement. In other words, it's what internalizes what it is that you bring to the table and what it is that that you're looking for to begin with. So being able to identify what you're looking for and then bounce these other 6 elements off of it are really the things that buyers can use to identify what they should be buying.
Got it. So really you're looking for where your strengths can fill in the holes of what the business has, and the business already has your holes kind of already filled in. Is that a way to summarize it?
That's a great way to say it. I think that, many searchers sort of sit around and look at businesses for sale as if it's kind of like a menu of food. Okay. And you walk into a restaurant, you sit down, and it's like, okay, I can have a salad or chicken or pasta or steak. And you know what? Maybe I'm not even hungry. I don't like any of this stuff. Well,
right.
Right. What do you bring to the table? What are you looking for? Like, you got to start there. Right. And then apply what you bring to the table with a specific growth opportunity, and buy the growth opportunity. In other words, it's called buy then build. It's not buy and chill out. Right? Like, you got to work. Building value is so important in getting this recipe right, because if you buy a lifestyle business and chill out, that's fine. But like, there's 2 thoughts here. Number one, if you're not growing, you're dying. Right.
Right.
Number 2, you always have to be working to make sure that you're, competitive in the space, because things change. And number 3, if you buy and then chill, that's fine, but it's only going to be worth that equity buildup, and you're sort of foregoing one of the major levers that you have to drive a return on your investment.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense. Okay, because at the end of the day, you don't want to just buy and chill, because if you're not growing, you're dying. That's such a good point. And if your business is dying, eventually you're going to lose out on the value of it. And so if you have this 10-year SBA loan, if it even makes it that long, but if you come in and say, okay, I'm going to take my skill set, fill in the blanks, and I'm going to start acquiring to build up the value, now all of a sudden you have a business that's bringing in more money, worth more money. And then when you go decide, hopefully, to sell it one day, it's worth a lot more and was worth your efforts, on top of the fact you were hopefully making money along the way.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, because we started to hint on growing through acquisition, and we didn't quite get there. But it's one of these where if you don't actually need to take a salary from the business you acquire, because you already have a base business, and then you do like leverage to the maximum. In other words, take a full 90%.
Right.
Okay. The thing is that the other 50%, the other 55% of the earnings that are coming in every year, you can pay down that principal even faster.
Right.
Like, it accelerates the value of your business at such a rate that, like, it's almost like, if you look at the curve of creating value through a startup, and then you look at the internal value created in like making double payments, the line is like the same. It's basically like having another startup on top of your company, right? That's just
got it.
So it starts to become like, real quick, you look at the numbers, and it starts to become like, okay, how much can I borrow? How fast can I go? I mean, it's a very attractive accelerator for the growth that we're all trying to achieve as entrepreneurs. And I actually think that acquisition entrepreneurship is better leveraged as an accelerator than it is as a startup vehicle, which is, I mean, my whole book is about using it as a startup vehicle.
Sure,
right?
sure.
But it's actually better as a growth through acquisition strategy.
Okay, so let's say someone, most people watching this are kind of in that online e-commerce, Amazon space. Should they focus on buying other e-commerce business, or do you think it makes sense to buy, like, I'm just going to say, a laundromat or some other local business?
It's a great question. What I want to share, Kevin, is my own experience. And at one point, I had a manufacturing company, a powder coating facility, a B2B fulfillment facility, an e-commerce facility, and I was doing some brokerage work on the side. And like, it's like spinning plates everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I had this dream that I was going to have like this little like private equity company, and it's too much and you can't manage it. There's not enough hours in the day, mostly just because of the things that come up that aren't on your calendar, right? And it's like, okay, I got this problem over here, this problem over there. So the thing is, even this weekend, I was reading a book by William Thorndike called The Outsiders, and it's all about CEOs that get extraordinary returns in their businesses. And the first chapter was the CEOs that get extraordinary returns in their businesses versus their counterparts. Those exceptional ones are ones that acquire only in their vertical, in their space. And the other corporate CEOs were diversifying.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think that, if I've got, in other words, 1 + 1 can equal 3, because you build up momentum and you turn, as Jim Collins would call that, flywheel in your business.
Right.
And if you have an e-commerce business, then there's going to be certain core competencies. Ordering from China, getting past customs and ordering things from China, branding, online marketing, social media. I mean, there's not a whole lot of, you've got a few core competencies, and then you just add to those and pick up momentum and do it better.
Okay.
That's what I would suggest, but it's subjective.
Gotcha. So you're suggesting stay within your lane, so to speak.
I think so. I mean, I think you hit a certain point where you can, I don't know. I mean, William Thorndike even just challenged that thought in me this weekend. So I haven't fully thought through that yet, but
Gotcha. So ask you again another time over a beer or something, and maybe get a different answer.
I think so. I think, you know what, Kevin, it's going to come down to what is the total market potential in your space, right?
Sure.
In other words, if I'm Amazon, at some point I buy Whole Foods because I can't build another.
Okay.
Right. So almost case in point right there. Right. And so the thing is the second they got into grocery now, 2 months ago, Amazon delivered to me a bottle of whiskey in 30 minutes or less, like on a Friday night. It was actually pretty awesome. But it's like, wow, that's cool. And so they took what they bring to the table and even applied it to Whole Foods, acquired Whole Foods. And now they've got, a whole nother depth and breadth of what they're doing. So.
Right. And looking at that is kind of a case study. Like, it's not exactly the same vertical, but it's still physical products. And they can now do what Walmart could do that they couldn't. And that was be more local to people. So I could see that, kind of in that strategy, although it doesn't sound like it's the same vertical, it kind of is, right?
So, Kevin, it's one of these things where, my shirt is from Banana Republic, and there is a Banana Republic about a half a mile from where I'm sitting right now. And I have not been there in 15 years. Okay. If I want to order something from this place half a mile down the road, I'm going to wait for it to show up a week later because I ordered it online. Right. Right. And the thing is like you're sitting there with, you've got hourly workers in a mall that no one is walking through, a half mile from, I don't know how many people live right here in St. Louis, but it's sort of like, why wouldn't you just do like Domino's Pizza 30 minutes or less, and then you can beat Amazon? Amazon, right? Whole Foods, which is closer, and they're probably going to deliver me the Banana Republic shirt faster, like in another couple of years, right? So I feel like it's sort of like if you focus on your core competency, and then you accelerate what you're doing with it, then eventually you're going to find opportunities to expand into. Or if you're buying to start, then figure out what you bring to the table so that you can capitalize on that opportunity, just like Amazon did with Whole Foods. Awesome. Cool.
Well, this has been a very helpful conversation. It's really got my mind going and my wheels spinning. So for somebody that wanted to take that next step and start, the process of like at least thinking about like, even if it's just on their dream board or whatever, or they want to start the process to look at a business, what's kind of next step?
Okay. I've got 3 things for you. Number 1, after being a licensed SEC stockbroker, certified M&A advisor, and buyer of businesses over a decade, I've had lots of opportunities to work in this space. And the thing is that the business summaries that came out of Quiet Light Brokerage were always better than anywhere else. I don't care what the size was, online, offline, whatever. And so the thing is that for people who are trying to work through what I call the Sabri curve, which is sort of the learning curve of what does it look like to look at businesses, I just encourage them, go to Quiet Light, sign up, and just innocently look at deals as they're coming. You can get a really good sense of businesses in an academic sense before you're ready to really pull the trigger. It's a great exercise. Number two, sort of buy then build is, 12 schools teach entrepreneurship through acquisition in the whole world. And it's Stanford, Harvard, University of Chicago. I mean, some of the best schools in the world.
Right, great schools, yeah.
20% of them use buy then build as a textbook. So I can't believe it, but it happened.
Wow.
It's a great DIY manual for here's how you do it. For people that want to sort of do it with you experience, I recently launched the acquisition lab through buy then build. So all of these are very, very affordable ways to get into it at varying degrees.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation here. So if somebody wanted to follow you a little bit more, or reach out to you, where would they go?
Sure. LinkedIn is a great spot.
Okay.
Walker Deibel. Also, I'm Walker at buythenbuild.com. So that's easy.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming on, Walker. This has been a great conversation. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section. And even if you're watching the replay, we'll make sure to get those to Walker or get those answered for you. So thanks so much, Walker.
Kevin, thank you. This was great. Thanks. So much fun.